Today, this is our presentation on how to make our democracy work for, how to make our money work for democracy and against wealth concentration. I'm Adrienne Molenkamp. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters of Athens County, and our main presenter today is John Howell, who is chair of our local monetary policy committee. We've allotted time for questions at the end, so we're going to ask that you hold your questions unless for some reason you can't hear or something like that. So let's get on to the committee work and what they've been doing. There we go. Okay. So the committee formed about 5 years ago in Athens, and the core of their work was a study that they started in 2021 with people from Athens and other places in Ohio and a couple of other states that did a study about monetary policy and league and democracy. Out of that study, they have published a report, which is available on our website. It has led to caucuses like this here both in Ohio and at National Convention, and proposals for national studies. The work of that committee has shifted a little bit over the years as they've studied different things and in league. And so the focus of today's presentation is going to be on extreme wealth concentration and how we can use the monetary system to better serve democracy. So we all know that the League cares about money in politics. It's been part of our Making Democracy Work campaign since 2016. That national campaign focuses on transparency, eliminating super PACs, and eliminating dark money. So now it's really more important than ever that we look at how we can get big money out of politics in the face of such extreme wealth concentration. So I am going to turn this over to John for all the meat of the presentation.
Well, thanks very much, Adrienne, and welcome to all of you. We appreciate your interest in this topic that we have become very interested in ourselves. So, as is shown here, the late Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis made the observation that we can have democracy, or we can have great wealth concentrated in the hands of the few, but we cannot have both. Well, today, we see concentrated wealth at work, undermining and even overtly attacking the principles of democracy, established to provide equal opportunity for all under the law. Principles that our country has aspired to since its very beginning. And anthropologists tell us that previous societies have encountered this problem and have developed intentional ways of addressing it to prevent wealth concentration from tearing their societies apart. And we're going to explore today the way our society might address this problem of wealth concentration and to develop policies that could stem the tide so as to prevent the extremes that overwhelm democracy. So the presentation is in two parts. We start with the problem of wealth concentration. We go on to consider the factors that contribute to wealth concentration, and then the policies the League already advocates to lessen it and its impact on democracy. Then we pull back the curtain on an unseen and unaddressed cause of the problem that is a stumbling block to the League's success, and that is the money system. And we'll address the matter in such a way to consider what we might be able to do about it. So, as you know, the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few creates enormous and increasing wealth disparities. The three richest men in the United States now own nearly $1 trillion, which is more wealth than the bottom half of all Americans. And in addition to owning and controlling major commercial corporations, these three men own and control major national newspapers and information hubs. This ownership gives them great power to determine the information that reaches voters. In addition to their power then to manipulate voter information, they can spend on elections at dominating levels. Well, according to the Federal Election Commission, in the last election, the presidential candidates reported raising a combined $1.6 billion. And of this, Elon Musk, my fingers got away from me here. Okay, there we are. Of this, Elon Musk accounts for nearly 1 in 5 campaign dollars. His businesses have received $19.8 billion in the United States, billion in U.S. government contracts since 2009. His companies were under investigation by 5 inspectors general. In the first days after taking office, with Musk at his side, President Trump fired the inspectors general and made Musk the investigator. This current turmoil centered in Washington is a product of extreme wealth concentration. Big money in politics is undermining our democracy in completely unprecedented ways. And that is only the reported money, not the dark money. So the question is then, we need to manage things, turning pages and holding inside of them. So the question is, how can we limit the concentration of wealth and therefore political power? What policies or strategies today can we generate to limit wealth concentration? So let's first consider what concentrates wealth, the processes. And the main factors are in the marketplace and with government laws that particularly tax laws and antitrust laws and laws that dictate how our money is created and managed. Now, the marketplace tends to concentrate wealth. But some degree of wealth disparity resulting from the development of useful goods and services seems both inevitable and totally appropriate. However, wealth concentration has also been facilitated by monopoly control of prices and wages, from enterprises that produce neither goods nor services, and from the development of assets now, such as cryptocurrencies that have no intrinsic value whatsoever. Governments do regulate marketplaces, and they do so primarily to protect people from being cheated or from unsafe conditions. For example, governments establish weights and other measures so buyers know what they're getting, and governments set building and occupational standards, zoning laws, and so on. So government regulation of the marketplace is important. But government policies other than those that regulate the marketplace also impact the distribution of wealth. And these policies can either support or restrain wealth concentration. Progressive taxation can curb wealth concentration. And the League studied taxation in the 1980s and supported progressive income tax, that is to say, taxing higher incomes at higher rates than lower incomes. The League lobbied to have capital gains taxed as normal income and to remove other loopholes in the tax law that favored wealth concentration. Today, however, our tax laws are not progressive. They are regressive. Billionaires pay proportionately less in taxes than the people working for them. Now, government spending policies can also curb or increase wealth concentration. Spending on social and physical infrastructure tends to distribute wealth rather than concentrate it. Think about impacts of government spending on Medicare, Social Security, education, child welfare. And then government spending that supports the courts and law enforcement is intended to benefit all, as are public health services and access to roads and bridges and public transportation. The League supports government expenditures on these things. And these expenditures then pollinate the achievement of individuals and the prosperity of communities. League members work incredibly hard to achieve our goals of a vibrant and effective democracy. And it's a heavy lift. Is there a leverage point that could focus our efforts, increase our effectiveness? Well, we think there is, namely the money and the money system. The money system is a fundamental foundation of our economy and our society. And League efforts are hampered by the current money system. The way it works now is to concentrate wealth and to undermine democracy. But it doesn't have to be that way. Oops. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be changed. The money system can support a fair distribution of wealth and establish a level playing field in which a fair and free market economy can flourish. We can have a money system that supports and amplifies our League efforts to achieve an inclusive and equitable democracy. There are four main keys to understanding the importance of the money system to the health and well-being of our democracy and of our nation. The first is that money exists through community-wide agreement. More than 2,000 years ago, Aristotle noted, money exists not by nature, but by law. Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution gives Congress the power to create our national money supply. The Supreme Court has ruled that Congress can provide the money, means of payment, in any way the Congress chooses as long as it remains constitutional. The Federal Reserve Act is the law that established the system that we use today. Though, since our founding as a nation, we've used a variety of kinds of money, which in and of itself is a fascinating topic for further study, but we won't touch on that today. The Federal Reserve Act was passed and signed into law in 1913. It's been amended several times since, and it can be amended again or changed with a new law. The second key is that money is a social tool. As a social tool, money circulates. It's used, of course, as many times by many people. We all know that. We tend to think about money as what we have for use now and in the future. But it is the flow of money that keeps the economy going. Money doesn't circulate well if just a few people have most of it. Money circulates best when it is widely distributed. Money is a social tool that serves the distribution and circulation of energy, resources, goods, and services. The third key is that government taxing and spending pollinate the achievements of individuals and the well-being of communities. Government spending bolstering the foundations of prosperity makes it possible for each of us to flower into our fullest potential. Research finds that every dollar that government spends into a community increases additional exchanges, economic exchanges in that community. If you cut government spending, more will be lost, more than that will be lost in economic activity. So money circulates between the I spending and the we spending. The money system that we have by law plays a key role in what is available for government spending on the public good, the we spending. So the fourth and final key is to understand that the money supplies grow over time as populations and productivity increase. So we have to ask, where does that new money come from? Who creates it? How is it added to the supply? Who chooses its first use? Who gets its first use? Well, our current money system concentrates it, and money creation is critically important. So next, let's explain the important aspects of money creation, the consequences, and our options. So here you see Federal Reserve data indicating the rise in the money supply from 1980 to 2024. And the gray vertical lines are recessions. On the right, you can see the 2019 recession. It's a thin line because it didn't last long. And then the COVID bump that was a primary cause of inflation. and then the reduction to bring down inflation and the resumption of the steady increase. So who creates the money? Who creates the money? That's important. Throughout history, governments at all levels have created money. Kings and provincial rulers coined their own money. Cities and state governments have created their own money. With prompting from Ben Franklin, the American colonies created their own money when enough coinage was simply not available from Europe. Government could create money today. It does so as coins. But today, most of our money is created by commercial banks, these mostly private for-profit corporations. They're privileged to create money by the Federal Reserve Act. And let me add that public banks and credit unions also operate the same way. They create money when they make loans. They function like other banks. Non-bank groups have also created and continue to create money, such as airline miles, Kroger coupons, you can buy things with those. But of course, that's not legal tender. You can't pay your taxes with it. And local nonprofit community groups have also created money just to serve their own needs. But in recent decades, as you know, modern computing technology has led to the introduction of privately issued cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin. And we'll have more to say about that later. But the point here is that 95% of our money is created by the banks as they extend loans. How is it created? Well, there are two primary ways to create money, as debt credit or as an asset. Creating money as a debt credit means lending money into circulation. Creating money as an asset means spending money into circulation. Banks today, of course, create money as debt credit, lending it into circulation. Money could be created not as a debt, but as an asset. When governments create money by spending it into circulation and instead of lending it, the money created represents revenue to the government. It's an asset with no debt involved. The greenbacks of the Lincoln administration that paid the Civil War soldiers were created in just this way. Who chooses the first use is important. When lending money into circulation, the lender chooses who gets it first. When spending it into circulation, the spender gets to choose first. And choosing first use is a power to determine the kinds of economic activity and business development that will be supported. Who actually gets the first use is important. When private commercial banks creates who gets first use, they make decisions based on what will benefit their shareholders. The system generally gives first use to those who already have money by lending against good credit and for collateral. When the wealthy get first use of the money, the flow of money in society is quite different from the flow that would result if the bottom 50% of earners got it first. The spending patterns of these groups simply differ. The bottom group spends a greater fraction of its resources on goods and services, which stimulate the real economy, and spends less on speculative investments in the financial sector. If governments were to choose first use, the decisions could be made democratically and for the general public good. For example, money creation linked to government spending on infrastructure would benefit the public sector, benefiting more people than money creation associated with bank lending to private parties, at least much of it. The power and privilege of first use can override other power structures. So let's consider now our present system. What are the consequences of our choice and what with regard to wealth concentration? Our current system is definitely designed to transfer wealth from the many to the few, increasing wealth concentration and disparity. How does it do that? Well, let's take a closer look. So our money system transfers wealth in three major ways. The first is that money is created by for-profit commercial banks that create the money supply. And this can be regarded as a privatization of a fundamental public utility. Secondly, creation is debt-based and it has a growth mandate. Thirdly, government debt is an intrinsic part of the system. Now let's explain those things. As we said earlier, money is created primarily by for-profit commercial banks as they make loans. Money supply goes up with every loan granted and goes down with every repayment. So government lending is what determines the money supply. So if some of you may be surprised to learn that the money supply is not created and maintained by the government. I certainly was when I learned about this a mere 15 years ago. The government does create coins, but that represents a tiny fraction of our money supply. And even our bills constitute no more than 5% of our money supply. Most of our money, at least 95%, exists only as money we hold in accounts. Think of it yourself. Where is most of your money? It's not in your pocket bills. It's in accounts. And it exists there only as accounts with no corresponding bills or coins. And the wealthier you are, the greater the fraction of your money exists as account money. So government expenditures are covered by taxation and borrowing. They are not covered by money creation. Our account money is created by banks as they make loans. Oops, I was supposed to hit that button earlier. So banks create the money, and by creating the money, they make money. There are, of course, costs in creating money and entering it into the economy. The difference between the costs and the value of the money that's created then is profit. And it has a special name in this case called seigniorage. In our current system, banks get the seigniorage. That's a huge benefit that no other business in the economy has. And this privileged benefit contributes to transferring wealth from the many to the few. So the first use in our current system goes to those who already have wealth. So banks as private corporations are committed to making profits for shareholders. They're inclined to loan money to proven profitable businesses. And some of that loan money helps to increase the production of goods and services and does get more widely distributed, does good things. For instance, as wages for employees. But a substantial and increasing fraction of bank loans, especially from Wall Street, stays in the financial sector where it is used for speculative purposes to profit the already very wealthy. Money in the financial sector has increased greatly in recent years, accounting for 20% to 50% of all business exchanges and resulting corporate profits. Choosing who gets first use of money with a mandate to choose the most profitable borrower without regard to whether the loan will be productive or increase the public well-being contributes to wealth concentration. Because the current system requires debt and because the government does not create money, the government must borrow when emergencies occur and tax receipts fail to cover expenses. This builds in a government debt requirement. Government also goes into debt to satisfy public purpose spending needs. Government spending distributes wealth by serving everyone through the building of roads, healthcare, public health, and so on. It's a countervailing force against wealth concentration. But the interest paid by the taxpayer to cover government debt, to the financial sector, to those who own government debt, those who have lent money to the government, the result is that we, the people, through government, borrow for public prospects, and the cost is roughly doubled by interest payments. In 2024, the federal government paid $909 billion in interest on Treasury securities held by the public. This was the fourth highest expense after Health and Human Services, Social Security, and Defense. The $909 billion is 12% of government spending. In 2025, it's going to be over $1 trillion. This $1 trillion is a transfer of wealth from all of us to the few who can afford to lend to the government. The transfer increases wealth concentration. But we have, oops, yeah, I forgot to press that button too. Okay. There it is. Right. anyway, let me say, let me go back up here because I think I skipped something. And you'll forgive me. I'm a little confused in my own organization here, or lack thereof. It's not there. 33, 34. Well, let me just speak to this without my script. The point is that the money supply must grow as the economy grows and the population grows. That's understandable. The money supply also grows to cover the interest on the money supply that is created. So the current system demands an increasing money supply continuously. An increasing money supply demands more productivity in order to avoid inflation. That means more consumption, more pollution of the atmosphere, more consumption of resources, more depletions of nature. Yes, so that's the sequence. Interest yields an increasing money supply, the increased money supply yields increased economic activity, and that increases consumption. Okay. Finally, let me just say that the purchasing power of our money has to do with the relation between the amount of money in circulation and the ability of the economy to use it in the production of goods and services. And when those get out of whack, you get inflation. So the current system, it really is designed to decrease the purchasing power over time. As a matter of fact, you all know that the government, the Federal Reserve, has an inflation target, 2% a year. It's planned. Okay, this decrease in our purchasing power, it's planned into the system. And it's been about 3% a year inflation since the Federal Reserve went into business, as it says down there. So the final point here is that because, haven't I already talked about this? No? Yes. I did.
You mentioned it. Yeah, you said the 12%.
But we didn't
Right,
see
okay.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, options. Okay, now I'm back on track. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Okay, well, let's break down this between the possibility now of private issuers of money versus public issuers of money. And let's look first at the possibilities of private issuers of money. And the first here is what we have now, namely commercial banks, including the mega banks on Wall Street, controlling the money supply under government regulation. Secondly, we could have a system controlled by commercial banks operating locally, as was the case in the United States between 1836 and 1913. During this time, banks could only operate within the states where they were chartered, no interstate banking. The German system today works somewhat similar to this. Third, we could allow non-bank corporations to create and control the money supply. For instance, special purpose corporations and corporations that issue cryptocurrencies. These all concentrate wealth because they're all run by corporations. Because cryptocurrencies are now in the news, let me say a little bit more about them. Throughout history, private currencies and payment systems have come and gone. Now, as you know, technology has enabled the introduction of digital currency, often referred to as cryptocurrency. And the first of those, of course, was Bitcoin in 2009. Some water there. It's got water in it, that should do. Thanks. Now, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies were just consisted of an independent money system used by relatively few people, they would be of little or no concern. Private money systems have come and gone. But an executive order entitled Strengthening American Leadership in Digital Financial Technology came out from Washington on March 9th. The order directed the United States Treasury Department to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. A bill, the Bitcoin Act of 2024, has been introduced into the U.S. Senate to do just that. Bitcoin, as I think all of you know, is utterly inappropriate as a reserve. Because, unlike gold, which did function as a reserve, Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. Bitcoin has value only because it's popular, it's in demand. When demand for it drops, its price falls. Its value is unstable, making it unsuitable as either a currency or as a reserve for a currency. It's also unsuitable as a currency for other reasons that are acknowledged by Bitcoin backers. The system is slow and it demands huge amounts of energy to do the calculations that are involved in the blockchain. So, and Bitcoin has been around for 16 years, but it's not very popular among retail outlets. Try to buy groceries with it. And here's another factor. The anonymity to its users had led to the use of Bitcoin and other cryptos in illegal activities. As of April 23rd, 25, government was reported to possess 198,012 Bitcoins valued at $18.5 billion. All gleaned from law enforcement activity against criminal operations. That's where they got it. The U.S. Marshal's Office has been selling off what they have seized. But the proposal now is to keep Bitcoin as a reserve, or maybe just to sell it later when the value has gone up. Playing the market. Government holding of cryptos would constitute government backing of them and would risk undermining the value of the U.S. dollar. Government acquiring and holding Bitcoin will certainly make its value go up because of increased demand, making the current current holders of Bitcoin much richer. This may provide a clue as to the motivation for these proposals. I'll let you judge. Wealth concentration, it certainly is. Cryptocurrencies create a form of money that operates outside the banking laws. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, is an advocate for digital assets, and his participation really undermines democratic norms and goals. On Friday, January 17th, the incoming president issued his own personal meme coin, the Dollar Trump. Within 3 days, the market capitalization skyrocketed to $15 billion. The market cap dropped down after that to $2.5 billion, but Trump earned $100 million in fees in the first week. This for-profit digital asset opens a wide door to funnel transactional funds to the President of the United States from foreign governments. What will be the impact on the concentration of wealth and on our democracy? Well, now let's talk about something more pleasant. Let's talk about the options for public use, public creation of money. So, the first one is, where'd this go? Oh, okay. No, I've got this figured out. Okay. First of those is the proposal that the Federal Reserve, our central bank, just issue its own digital currency. It would be a cryptocurrency with the backing of the state for security, and therefore it would outperform and essentially drive its competitors out of business because they don't have any security background. So that's the strategy of the central banks, and it has global support from central banks around the world. And the Federal Reserve, our own Federal Reserve Bank, and the previous administration expressed some interest in this possibility. It's called central bank digital currency. The idea is that everybody could have an account at the central bank. But this idea, despite popularity among central banks, has been now deep-sixed by the current administration. Second proposal is to have public banks create money. Money could then be lent to projects of public benefit. The profits of lending would go to the local public entities that own the banks, such as cities or states, instead of to Wall Street. One public bank currently exists. It's a Bank of North Dakota. This option is supported by the Public Banking Institute, led by Ellen Brown. It's a very good organization. The third possibility here is local money. It seems odd to say that, but local money systems have been important throughout history, typically when other money was or is not available. So local money systems help to keep money local. Examples include the Berkshire system in western Massachusetts in our country, and the Sarafu credit system in Kenya. When national currencies fail, local money systems provide economic lifeboats for communities. Oh, wait a minute. There's a fourth one. I forgot that. Okay. So the fourth one option is supported by the Alliance for Just Money, of which I'm a member, I'm on their board, is for full transition from privately created money to publicly created money. Bank creation of money would end. Banks would lend only pre-existing money, that is to say, money they actually have. Government spending in excess of tax receipts would directly increase the money supply. The need for government borrowing and growing government debt would end. Congressional spending would be guided by an independent monetary authority to avoid inflation or deflation. Now these four proposals are not mutually exclusive. Public banks and local currencies can exist side by side with either of these other two. And each of these proposals would couple money creation with wealth distribution rather than wealth concentration. Oops. So, in conclusion, we hope you'll take away the idea that the money system is a foundational and formative influence on our society. The money system matters greatly to lead goals for a healthy, prosperous distribution of wealth and a healthy democracy. The money system can support a fair distribution of wealth and a level playing field in which a fair and free economy can flourish. Extreme wealth concentration undermines and overwhelms processes fundamental to our democratic republic. It threatens human rights and individual liberties, but it can be reversed and prevented in the future through a combination of monetary reform, tax reform, and reasonable marketplace regulation. The League already advocates for both a progressive tax system and effective marketplace antitrust enforcement. That advocacy should certainly continue. We also urge the League to address the role of the money system in the erosion of democracy that we are witnessing. Well, how to do that? At this stage, we urge state leagues and local league chapters to hold conversations and study groups on the topic. Such efforts could lead to a national conversation by the league, and maybe an actual position statement for the league. The league could help promote a national conversation about the money system, because it is a national conversation that is needed. So at this point, there are some resources, and we have a handout up here with the specific linkages here that you can pick up over here, and it will also be on our website after we get back home, so you can access it here. So let me turn it back over to Adrian.
All right, thank you for joining us. We're going to take questions in just a moment. I wanted to thank the committee who did this study work and did the presentation today. So they include John, as well as Suzanne Howell, Debbie Schmeeding, Mary Costello, Linda Parsons, Lucille Eckrich, Virginia Hammond, and Ryan Enger. John reminded you about the handouts. There is a sign-up sheet coming around, and we'll send the presentation to any of those. We are recording today, and plan to post on our YouTube website, but if any of you who are here object to that, come talk to us, and we won't post it. Questions? Who has a question they'd like to ask?
Questions or comments?
Yeah.
I have a question. This was really interesting. Thank you so much. I was wondering if you could contrast or have any thoughts about the U.S. system versus other major developed nations. So I heard you talk about Germany having a kind of more like a local bank
Right.
approach. Are there other countries that you think have a system that's more in line with
I'm gonna repeat the question so everybody can hear. So the question was if John could talk about how the U.S. system compares to other countries, if there's anything to learn from that.
There are some differences, but the money system is global. So in each country has a central bank. The central banks function like that in virtually every country. There are some differences that are significant, and the German one is different because it has this history of local banks that were sort of community owned, partly privately, partly so that the local community leaders had a role in the bank, and so deciding where loans were to go and so on. And it has propelled their small industries very well in Germany, and they have more innovative small businesses than any other country, as a matter of fact. So that's one difference. There are different practices in banking too. Islamic banks do not charge interest. That's contrary to the Quran. What they do is they do charge fees, and they have to cover their costs. So they do have a way of charging fees. But one of the characteristics, at least in some of the Islamic banks, is that the loan agreements are, instead of a certain amount every month, a certain fraction of your income that month. So if you lose your job, your payments go down. So that takes the heat off a little bit of this sort of dominance that essentially lenders have over spenders, over borrowers, because borrowers are very much at the mercy of those lenders. And if the lenders can't be a little flexible with this, and right now the attitudes in terms of our business economy as a whole, I mean, it's just become sort of part of our Western society that it's profits that count. And so the system is global, but there are these differences, so it's worthwhile exploring these differences as to which works a little bit better, because whatever change we get is probably not going to be what the Alliance for Just Money wants, like that. It's not going to happen. So the question is, other smaller changes can move in that direction that we should be supportive of. And the other issue that always comes up is, man, you're crazy. You're never going to get this kind of what with the power that is vested now in the banks and it's true. The only time in our history where there's been significant reform of the money system, you can guess, is during the Depression. That's when banks lost their credibility, lost their power over the political process, and reforms that were meaningful were put in place at that time. We got the Federal Reserve System. It isn't perfect, and it'd be nice now to be able to step forward into something better that will meet our requirements for the future.
I think we have time for one more question for the group, if anybody else has a question or comment. Okay, go ahead.
So, you know, John, you've suggested lots of courses of action, and so many of them have elements of politics involved. And this is something that is like a mountain you're trying to push. And so is it reasonable to assume that for members of the league across the country, that it's important to support the right initiatives like progressive tax rates, to vote for the right candidates, to deal with the right banking institutions, community banks in particular, as opposed to, say, large commercial banks that have a national charter that deal with people all across the country?
Right.
Okay, so I think the question is, this whole big project is gonna take a long time. If we're moving in that direction, what can we do now as individuals?
I
Is
suppose that would be right.
Okay, so,
This is an educational phase. So what we can do is educate and talk about it in our local leagues and wherever we can to make people realize that this is a variable. It's not cast in stone what we have. So I think that's where we are. And the things that you mentioned are absolutely right. And what he mentioned is the idea of patronizing your local banks rather than Wall Street banks, patronizing your community banks, and be active in terms of supporting candidates, obviously, who are interested in monetary reform. And that's a political process, and we here are nonpartisan, but it's an issue we're after here. And we welcome people from across the spectrum. And there is interest in monetary reform across the political spectrum. So thanks for the question.
okay, thank you all. I encourage you, if you have questions later, because this takes a little while to sink in, or if you're interested in having a presentation for your local group, to reach out to us or come talk to us, please come take some materials. Thank you.
These